By 1818, the East India Company had no serious rival left in India, with one exception. Across the Sutlej River in the northwest, a man had built something the company's strategists had to admit was impressive: a unified, disciplined, well funded Sikh empire stretching from the hills of Kashmir to the plains of Sindh, with an army trained by Napoleonic veterans. The company did not attack it. For 30 years, the two powers watched each other across a river. Then, in 1839, Ranjit Singh died. Maps, money, decisions. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab. Maharaj Ranjit Singh unified the Sikh mishals, the Confederate fighting clans, between 1799 and 1801, and spent the next 4 decades building a state that looked nothing like the fragmented confederacies the company had been picking apart to the south. Start with the army. The Khalsa Dal was reorganized by European Napoleonic veterans, among them Jean-François Allard, a Frenchman, and Jean-Baptiste Ventura, an Italian. Modern infantry drill, field artillery, disciplined cavalry. Estimates of the Khalsa's total strength at peak run from around 60,000 trained regulars to over 100,000 when irregulars are included. The figures are contested, but the scale was formidable. Then the revenue. Ranjit Singh ran a fiscal state. Land revenue was systematized. He conquered and incorporated Kashmir, Peshawar, and Multan. Each conquest added revenue and strategic depth. And diplomacy. In 1809, Ranjit Singh signed the Treaty of Amritsar with the company. The Sutlej River was the boundary, the company's influence to the east and south, Ranjit Singh's authority to the west and north. Neither side would cross into the other's sphere. It held for 30 years because both sides were getting what they wanted. Now look at the balance sheet. Revenue, systematized land tax, trade routes through the northwest. Military, a large trained army with European standard drill. Territory, Punjab, Kashmir, Multan, Peshawar, the northwest corner of the subcontinent. And one fixed boundary, the Sutlej. The company's restraint is sometimes narrated as respect for Ranjit Singh. And perhaps there was an element of that. But respect is not the full story. There were 3 harder reasons. First, military. The Sikh Khalsa was genuinely formidable. After Asai, the company's officers knew what a well-drilled army with European training looked like. They did not want another Asai multiplied by 5. Second, strategic. Beyond Punjab lay Afghanistan, and beyond Afghanistan lay Russia. The competition for Central Asian influence, what we now call the Great Game, was becoming the dominant anxiety of British India in the 1830s. Punjab was a buffer state. A friendly Punjab was more useful alive than absorbed. Third, fiscal. Annexation is expensive. Every new territory requires administration, garrison, courts, roads, civil servants. The company's London directors were already alarmed by costs. Adding Punjab meant adding those costs, plus a potentially hostile northwest frontier. The choices were annex by force, absorb through a subsidiary alliance. Ranjit Singh had firmly declined every time. Or maintain the Sutlej boundary, treat Punjab as a buffer, and wait. The company chose to wait. It was, while Ranjit Singh lived, the correct calculation. Ranjit Singh died on the 27th of June, 1839. What followed was not a succession. It was a collapse. Within 6 years, 4 different men sat on the throne of Lahore. Several were murdered. The Queen Regent, Jind Kaur, mother of the boy king Duleep Singh, tried to hold the court together against the factions tearing it apart. The great military force Ranjit Singh had built, the Khalsa, had become a political actor in its own right. The army's councils, the panchayats, were pushing for action against internal rivals, against the company, against anything that would keep them occupied and paid. An idle, unpaid army in a fragmented court is not a defense, it is a pressure. Look at the court by 1844. Ruler, Duleep Singh, a child. Regent, Jind Kaur, under pressure from factions. Army, large, politically active, demanding action and pay. Treasury, strained. Company, watching from across the Sutlej. In December 1845, the Sikh army crossed the Sutlej River. The First Anglo-Sikh War had begun. Why did the Khalsa cross? The military councils wanted war. Some historians argue the court itself encouraged the crossing, hoping the company would defeat the army and solve the court's internal problem for it, essentially inviting the company to disarm a military that had become a political threat. That interpretation is contested, not settled fact. What is clear is that the company, positioned and watching, was ready. 4 battles in 6 weeks. Mudki, the 18th of December, 1845. Firozeshah, the 21st and 22nd. Aliwal, the 28th of January, 1846. Sobraon, the 10th of February. The Sikh artillery was excellent, arguably the finest the company had faced in India. Casualties on both sides were heavy. The company won each engagement. The Treaty of Lahore, March 1846. The Sikh army was reduced in size. Kashmir was ceded to the company, and then sold by the company to a local chief, Gulab Singh, for a cash payment. A British resident was installed at Lahore. Duleep Singh kept his throne as a nominal sovereign. The sale of Kashmir would become a separate, long-running story, but that is another episode. 2 years of uneasy peace. Then, in 1848, the revolt began. Not from Lahore, but from the provinces. 2 local governors, at Multan and at Peshawar, rose against British authority. The Khalsa joined them. The Second Anglo-Sikh War, 1848 to 1849. At Chilianwala in January 1849, a hard and costly company victory. At Gujarat in February 1849, more decisive. On the 29th of March 1849, Governor-General Lord Dalhousie proclaimed the annexation of the Punjab. Full annexation, not a subsidiary alliance, not a reduced monarchy, but direct British rule. The young Maharaja Duleep Singh was removed from Lahore. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, the prize jewel of the Lahore treasury, was transferred to the company and subsequently to Queen Victoria. It was presented as a gift. The circumstances of that transfer are, to put it carefully, contested. Dalhousie's calculation, after the Second War, the options were to reduce Punjab again to a client state under a child with a rump army, or to annex outright. A second partial settlement had already failed. A third would fail again. He was probably right about that. And the annexation was still the end of a kingdom. Step back from 1849 and look at what the company had done over 1 century. In 1750, the company had 3 coastal trading posts. By 1849, it administered or controlled virtually the entire subcontinent, including now a buffer zone running to the Khyber Pass and the mountains of the northwest. The Sikh annexation was in some ways the cleanest case in this series. A well-run state, a strong ruler, a carefully maintained peace, and then a succession crisis that the company used with surgical patience. The company did not destroy the Sikh empire. The court did that. The company waited, intervened twice, and on the second intervention, stayed. Look at the final map. The company's position in 1849, the whole subcontinent, bar some client princely states, the largest army in Asia, a revenue base that dwarfed any European parallel. And politically, still the East India Company, a private corporation, ruling in the name of the Mughal emperor, whose actual authority, by this point, ran to the walls of the Red Fort in Delhi and no further. That tension had been building since 1765. By 1849, it was becoming something the balance sheets could not capture, because ledgers don't measure grievance, and they don't tell you what happens when 100,000 soldiers compare their payslip to their sense of dignity. The company had spent 2.5 centuries becoming a government, and it still was not, technically, a government. It was a corporation with a charter, holding a subcontinent on behalf of shareholders in London. That paradox had been building since 1765. By 1849, it was becoming unstable in ways the balance sheets could not fully explain, because ledgers don't capture grievance, and they don't capture what happens when 100,000 soldiers compare their payslip to their sense of dignity. Next time, how the company actually ruled. and why, in 1857, the system broke. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab,